Thomas Jefferson approaches from his house. Right there. Beautiful day. What do you say? It's about 74 degrees, Tim?
Kiko. Okay, you just say hi. How are you in a random language?
Oh, that's awesome.
Why are you on D&D? What? Why are you on the stairs?
We have quite a gathering going on here. Someone calls me. Citizens, I'm delighted to know that you've taken time out of your most valuable day to scale 900 feet above sea level to come visit with us here. At Monticello. And I mean that sincerely. This is ours. It's the unwritten code of Virginia hospitality. To welcome anyone on the road to come visit whenever you choose, stay as long as you choose, share meals, spend the night. We hope while you're here you'll visit with as many of our families as you have time. I mean not only the Jeffersons and the Brandons, we hope you may visit with the Fawcetts and the Grangers, the Colberts, the Gillettes, the Evans, the Hemmings. Already that's an exhaustive invitation, and it's only a few of us. I think you know the greater number of us continue to live here where so many of us were born, grew up, intermarried. Many of our families knowing one and the other for several generations, my parents and grandparents, because this is no different than the experience throughout our neighborhood, throughout our commonwealth. This is no different than the experience throughout our entire nation. You know this. Because nothing so profoundly reminds us of where we've been. And to understand, I hope more profoundly, where we are. And the further work that is necessary to continue the founding principles of our remarkable nation to rectify the old habits, the old customs, and the old laws in which we did not have a say. And I mean that because before the American Revolution, no matter who we were or where we were from, we were born and grew up English, and therefore abided by English habits, English customs, and English laws. Again, not overnight, but for many, many generations. And so therefore, no one perhaps could appear more incongruent or conflicting to those old laws and the founding principles of our nation than myself standing right here upon what you know is my inheritance. This is where I was born and grew up. Oh, I married back east, but I brought my new bride here 120 miles into the wilderness, into this forest primeval. That is how I have already known it. But citizens, I inherited when my father, who was only 49 years old, passed away in 1757. He left my mother a widow to preside over the rearing of 10 children. And I was his eldest son, so therefore I would inherit under the British laws of primogeniture. Those laws that entitled the eldest son in a family to inherit all of his father's freeholdings. Only the freeholdings. That meant that the family held their land entirely. They owned it outright. And you know as well as I do, not only the real estate, not only the lands, but all of the families living thereupon. So that inheritance, 3,000 acres at the time and 5 farms, has grown now to over 5,000 acres and 6 farms. And of course, it reminds us, does it not? It should, that we did not begin our nation from nothing, did we? We inherited. We inherited so much that remains with us, that continues to be our great conflict and continues to be our calling to rectify with our founding principles. Now, lamentably, the laws of our Commonwealth allow us only about 20-25 minutes out of doors to gather. Now, that's hardly time to bring this all into a recognition. There's hardly time to engage the art of conversation. I consider several hours around the meal table to be far more conducive to it, and I want to hear from you, because so many people are coming up here with concerns upon their mind, particularly upon what I have just revealed, I am certain. And so therefore, I hope during the time we are together, I may provide for you in a commentary some clarity. More particularly, I hope they may provide a context of whatever is on your mind, because truly more people are gathering here this year 22 than I've ever known before. It is the year 22, is it not? 1822. Citizens, I was not here in 1722. I'm not going to live to see 1922. So there it is, very simply. Many people coming you asking me what it was like. And of course, my encouragement to everyone is not to forget what it was like, to remember where we be in order to understand where we are. To continue to remind ourselves that we are the first in human history to create a government of, by, and for. Well, now there you are. That was about as weak as I've ever heard. we cannot hazard to forget this, citizens. Let it come immediate to your mind. That is who we are. You know, the Romans said man is only one generation removed from barbarism. You know what that means? It only takes one generation to forget. And then you fall backward. And you wonder, can you make it up again for the ensuing generations? So this is our work, to remember. To remember that we are the first in human history to create a nation upon principle, found an entire nation upon principle, not upon monarchy, not upon royalty, nobility, aristocracy, landed gentry, mercy. Remember, that's why we fought the war. That's why we shed our blood. It was not easy, nor is the work that continues before us. As you may know, I'm considered to be the one to draft our nation's founding principles. In fact, President Washington referred to it as our promise. Anyone know what I'm referring to myself? Our Declaration of American Independence. It's ours. But as I've said, let it be a beacon light for the family man across the globe, that all may recognize their inherent right to burst forth from the monkish chains of ignorance and grasp the reins of self-government. Now, you know, if our declaration had been law, everything that I'm saying here before you would now be a moot point. We would hope that we've made a greater advance, but no. Our declaration is not law. It's a letter. It's a letter that we've written to ourselves and the family of man across the globe to provide the enlightenment of where we are now and where we can proceed. The hope, if you will, for so many of you who have left monarchies, left totalitarian, left authoritarian governments in order to come here with that promise, that hope to hold the reins of self-government. And arriving here, as I've just referred, discovering the population has already been here, who we have already been. Red, white, black, that's who we have been, that's who we continue to be. You make it the more American as it ought to be. That is who we are. That's why we are the envy of the world. That is why the eyes of the world are upon us. Everyone questioning, is this American experiment in self-government going to survive? There's nothing new or original in our Declaration of American Independence. It was not our intent to come up with anything new or original, but simply to resuscitate, rejuvenate, reiterate man's eternal struggle for freedom. Mankind. Everything in it you may find, as I've said, in the elementary books of public right, the works of Aristotle, Cicero, Algernon Sidney, John Locke, Adam Smith, Thomas Paine. Those authors, their works you've read and reread frequently. No, you have not, but do not worry about it. Neither has anyone else. Remember, in 1776, many people could not even read. When I was invited to take up the pen, I knew I had to write something that could be publicly read, that could communicate clearly and extensively man's eternal struggle for freedom, the work that is ahead for us. I realized that I had to write something that could be comprehended in the great diversity of our population even then. And never forget, that diversity is our greatest strength. I had to shed the lofty sophisms of those ancient authors, explain it in clear and simple terms as an expression of the American mind. To place before the world the common sense of the matter that our American Revolution was fought on behalf of the common man, to provide the greatest good for the greatest number. It's written in 3 parts. The first part pronounces boldly man's inherent rights. Those rights that are given to the family of man across this globe, to each individual, not by any government, not by any ruler. The rights that are given to each individual by nature and nature's God. The right to self-government. The right to equal and exact justice. Who can deny that for any individual? The first 2 paragraphs are but a reiteration of the old Justinian Code of Law. Some gentlemen here may know that. The first civil body of law proffered to Western man in the 6th century by Roman Emperor Justinian I. The foundation of the Justinian Code, everyone is born free. Everyone. Everyone comes into this world with a right to their own person and to move wherever they choose to improve their condition. Now that almost disappeared through the ages of the darkest ignorance, did it not? But thank heaven for the printing press to disseminate this information to the greatest extent, provoking people to want to read. And what happens when you begin to read for yourself? You begin to think for yourself. Uh-oh. Do you think any medieval European monarch wanted their subjects to learn how to read for themselves and think for themselves? Do you think any medieval ecclesiastic wanted their congregations to learn how to read for themselves and think for themselves? No, citizens. We are the first nation in the history of man founded upon those principles of the enlightening of the mind of man, the product of the printing press, facts and information disseminated to the greatest extent. Now, I summed it up more or less in the first two paragraphs in one sentence. I wrote, all men are, I beg your pardon, ladies. I beg your pardon, all men means
Amen.
mankind. Exactly right. We understood that at the time. Now, are we all created equal in face and form? No, of course not. It's your great advantage. You look far different than I do. Are we all created equal in mental capacity? No, some of us are minds more acute, others we take our time. But are we not all created equal in nature? Are we not all born free? Of course we are, as the flora and fauna. That's self-evident. But read the second part. That's so necessary to follow, because it reminds us starkly that though we're all born free in nature, we are born into the laws of man. There is the conflict. There's the contradiction. It always has been, it always will be. But there's never been a better opportunity to rectify that than there is now with the founding of our remarkable nation. Read that second part, because it will remind you of what could happen if we forget. Well, remember, as Englishmen, were we not guaranteed the right of Englishmen, the right to petition for redress of grievances? Remember that? And do you remember we would petition till the cows would come home? It never went anywhere. Why? Why? We were told we had the rights, but our petitions never went anywhere. Why? Citizens, we were not represented in Parliament. We had no representation. Read that second part and you will read the long litany of our grievances for which we never received redress. I'll quote a few of them. He has dissolved our representative forms of government. He has closed down our courts of justice. He has caused insurrections amongst us. He has sent his troops to subdue us. He has made his judges dependent upon his will alone. Any of that sound familiar? It should, lest we forget. The third part of our declaration is our remarkable compact. It is what we achieved before the declaration was written, before the war began, before we could even proclaim independence. We achieved something England never ever wanted to have happen. Anyone know what I'm referring to? Pardon me? No, the articles did not come until much later. No, before independence. Before we could ever, beg pardon?
Land ownership.
No, not land ownership, sir. Englishmen secured that, I can show you.
Freedom of speech.
Citizens, we brought 13 individual nations together. E pluribus unum. Now, how did we do that? How did we do that? Each one of those former colonies distant, disparate one from the other, arguing, bickering one with the other, differences of religious opinion in one versus a vast difference in the other, the number of freeholders living in one versus the greater number of tenants living upon the freeholdings in the other. There was slavery in every single one of them. And that is exactly how England wanted to keep it. Why? Exactly. That's an element, isn't it, of politics. Divide and cause internal vitriol and strife. Make people contentious with one and the other, because there will always be someone in control. And where will all the money be going? As happened with us, the money was all going 3,000 miles away. Follow the money. Rest you assured. This is always a device of politics. but it never lasts very long. Politics never lasts very long in any one shape or form. It's transient. Good common sense will always overwhelm it. 2 heads are better than 1. 3 heads better than 2. 13 heads collectively will always be better for the common safety, the common defense, most importantly, the common good. Everybody ultimately benefits. It does not happen overnight. You have to remain consistent. That last line in our declaration is the most important to remind us of what we achieved. I quote, in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our... No, that's part of it. Our... No. Thank you. Well, I am certainly glad we are gathered here today. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Give that gentleman a round of applause. There's our charge. Some of the gentlemen here may better understand it, so mote it be. We pass this on to generations yet unborn. President Washington referred to our Constitution as the guarantee of our promise. Now, I beg your pardon, I was not here during the Constitutional Convention. That convention met in Philadelphia, September 1787. Anyone have an idea where I may have been during that time? I was spending 5 delightful years in La Belle, France, negotiating treaties of trade and the like. So I beg your pardon, I missed the 80s. I missed them completely. When I returned, I was cautious about the strengthening of our federal government. However, I was greatly relieved by our new Constitution. It is the shortest document of its kind in human history, creating a government to check its own power. That does not happen in monarchy. That does not happen in any totalitarian or authoritarian government. We check our own power in our government. And of the 3 branches, which branch is the most influential? The legislative branch, exactly. That branch elected by whom? Well, there's the controversy. As I hear it all the time, Mr. Jefferson, people asking me, who are we the people? Mr. Jefferson, are we a democracy or are we a republic? Now, citizens, take this to heart. Take this personally. What is the first line in our Constitution? We the people. Now, who here would think they are the less implied in that first line than someone else? Take it personally. It's meant to be personal. The inherent right of every individual to self-government. The inherent right of every individual to equal and exact justice. We are a democracy. That's exactly what we set out to be and aspire to be. However, at present, I'm not going to deny, as Dr. Franklin and others have said, we're perhaps no better than an old Roman republic right now. A republic is an entitled franchise. Those entitled to vote. And I suppose that's what we observed 2 years ago when we witnessed another presidential election, did we not? Well, I hope you've all heard by now, my neighbor, my friend, President Monroe, was reelected. But who here did not have a vote or a voice in that election? Say it loud. Women. No vote, no voice. Who else? Not only the enslaved, anyone of color. Anyone of a particular hue from a foreign land who has every right, like you all, to come here and better their condition. No vote, no voice. The natives of this land, no vote, no voice. We still have British laws on our books in some of our states defining a mulatto to the 3rd and 4th generation. Now, use your common sense. How can you tell? A white male, 21 years of age or older, who does not hold property. No vote, no voice. A white male, 21 years of age or older, who holds property, but is mortgaged. I don't care to know who you are. But it's not your property. It belongs to whom? Well, your creditor, whomever your creditor may be. Your creditor may be a wealthy woman of color. No matter her wealth, she still does not have a vote or a voice. So the only one I have ever known, lamentably the only one I may ever know, simply because of old British laws still in our books. And mind you, in 4 years, our nation will be 50 years old. The only one who has a vote or a voice in our nation is the white male freeholder, 21 years of age or older. And I ask you, my fellow Americans, nonetheless, hear my eye. Does that represent the first sentence in our Constitution? There's our work. There's our work. I I cannot make it the more clear or provide a better context. The American Revolution continues. It bothers me quite a bit because 2 years ago our census reveals our population now at 9 million, nearly 600,000. Can you imagine a population 9 million? And the franchise represents less than 6% of our population. Less than 6% are entitled to vote. And I hope you've heard 2 years ago we admitted Maine as our 23rd state, and then we turned right around and admitted Missouri as our 24th state, and they're calling it a compromise? Exactly. A compromise? Citizens, think about this. We have admitted Maine